let's get right into it. Here are my 5 most fundamental tips to help you improve at Age of Empires 4. So whether you are new to RTS or new to the Age franchise and you're looking to either climb the rank ladder or just improve and be able to play harder AIs or play 2v1s versus AI by yourself, or you want to jump into online custom games, again, 5 tips that should help you improve the fastest as a beginner. Number 1 is going to be pick a civ. Pick one civ. Very basic, but here's why. So AoE 4, currently there are 10 unique civs. There are more coming soon, but each civ is unique in the way that they start the game, whether it's resources or the units they start with or the buildings that they need to start building right away. Some civs start with extra wood, some have less gold, some have different, like I said, different units. Chinese start with an Imperial Official, HRE start with a Prelate, Mongols start with a Gur, which is a resource drop-off building, and then they need to build an Uvu. Delhi needs a mosque. Abbasid need to make a House of Wisdom. So they're different enough that it can be overwhelming as a new player trying to figure out how to start the game with each of these civs. It's very important, that opening and maximizing your efficiency in order to get to Age 2, where a lot of things happen and where a lot of the action really picks up in Age 2. So that timing gets very important. So you want to pick a civ and learn it. I suggest once you pick that civ, you can go and find a build order to kind of kick it off. There's build orders all over YouTube. If you search, English build order or whoever you pick, and then you can go in and either practice that right on the rank ladder, or you can jump into single player games and you can just do it by yourself, or you can throw an AI in there and just over and over play that first 5 minutes of the game and play until you hit that age up, or play until you hit the age up and transition into Age 2. And then once you're comfortable with that, you can take it, like I said, to the ranked ladder or into an actual game against the AI and really get a feel for playing the game out. So I would start with 1. Pick a civ, get good at it. You'll get familiar with the overall game mechanics and managing late game just by getting more familiar with the game over time. So later on, when you do look to transition into playing other civs, the biggest hurdle is going to be that opening and having that efficient timing into Age 2, and you'll have a better feel for the game as a whole and playing late game and how you want to allocate your resources and how to spend those. All right, tip number 2, make more vills. All right, and I'm gonna transition over here to a notepad. So we went number 1, pick a civ. Number 2, make more vills. If you are playing on Xbox that recently released, this isn't going to be as much of a hurdle for you. As I understand it, there is a like an auto vill queue feature. However, PC currently anyway does not have that. Now this is a tip that really can be applied at about any level from bronze on up to conqueror, but similar to a couple of the other tips here, there are different levels that you can get into that tip. So we're going to keep it just surface level here. Make more vills. Common mistake with new players is they'll frequently idle their TC. So their TC is sitting without actually creating villagers continuously. So you want to make sure that you've got that sucker working nonstop. So if you're not at 200 population cap, you should still be making villagers, right? So a lot of times at lower leagues, you'll see people stop with sometimes not even 50 vills, but 50, 60, 70 vills, where if you watch some of the top players play, or probably anybody maybe diamond and above, a lot of times you'll see those games at 100 vills plus, sometimes upwards of 130 to 150 vills, right? And the reason that you want to make sure that you're creating those villas nonstop until your population capped. Just to give you an example, say you and your opponent, you're both capped out at 200 population, right? You've got 50 villagers and 150 military. They've got, for example, 130 villas and 70 military. Now, if you move in and try to attack them, they're going to have what's called a defender's advantage. So as their units die, they can create them there, right there in their base, and they're there to fight. Where yours, as yours die, you have to travel all the way across the map to fight in their base. So if they've got 70 military and you've got 150, and they have their TC or maybe a castle or whatever, towers, right? In theory, they should be able to beat your army, right? Just because they're able to replace what they lose before you can travel all the way across the map. So if they've got 130 villagers, they can keep pumping out those units. If you've only got 50 villagers, there's a much better chance that you've already exhausted all of your resources and you can't even continue to make military units any longer. So they're going to remass, reboom, get back to that 200 population cap, and they're just going to come across the map and steamroll you, because you won't have that defender's advantage any longer because you can't make units any longer. So make vills. We'll make a note here. So at least 100 plus, right? And as I mentioned, that can change as you get into different levels, right? As a beginner, we're focusing on just one TC. As you get more proficient or climb the ranks, it might be common to go 2 TCs, and then depending on the situation, sometimes 3, even 4 TCs. So just something to keep in mind. All right, tip number 3 is going to be scouting, and this covers a couple of different topics. When scouting, a major objective, especially at the start of the game, you want to scout for sheep. The reason you want to find sheep is that is a food source for you, and the more sheep that you find, the longer you can put off having to move out onto the map for additional food sources, which can be risky, especially if you're playing somebody like a French, right? When they're going to be showing up with knights just about as soon as you hit age 2. Also, the more sheep that you get, the less sheep that your opponent gets. So the less that they get, again, the sooner they'll have to either move out into the map, or the sooner they'll have to transition into farms, which costs additional resources. So you want to scout around. You want to try to find as many sheep as you can for your food source. You also want to scout around for other resources. So again, once your sheep dry up, where's your next destination for food going to be? Where's your next destination? Where's your next wood line once your main wood that you're chopping runs out? So you want to scout for your resources. You also want to scout for your opponent's resources. You can kind of get an idea, depending on what civ they are, and as you get familiar with that, if they're going to be moving out to deer, where's the deer pack that they're going to have to move out to? You want to scout for relics. So as you progress in the game, as you get to castle age, you can collect relics that generate passive gold. So you want to know where those are. In a 1v1, there's always 5 on the map. There might be several exceptions to that. The other thing would be sacred sites. So that can be a bigger factor against some civs than against others. Like against Delhi, that's something that they're going to be going for every time. So you want to make sure you know where those are, so you can either contest it or where you can go and try to fight for them back, or try to shut them down. So scouting is very important. Again, this is something that gets more complex the higher you climb the ladder, or the higher rank you get. You'll get into things like scouting where your opponent's army is, scouting what production buildings they have to anticipate what kind of army they're going to have. But again, at the base of it, you want to scout and get sheep, scout and find resources, and then you can just park your scout a lot of times just in the middle and see when your opponent has units coming your way and when you have to put up your defenses. Tip number 4, become familiar with unit counters. AoE Forward uses it's a rock, paper, scissor type system. Let's see here. I've got a table. This is just something I searched and found online. Now, this can be a little overwhelming to look at. There's a lot going on here, but we're going to break this down and try to simplify it a little bit. So this has, I think, all of the units that are currently in the game. There's been a few variations. Abbasid has a Gulam, which is essentially a men-at-arms. Mongols have a Keshik, which is essentially a modified knight. So we'll kind of go through this and like I said, make some notes to try to simplify it here. But really the way that you read this is from left to right. So for example, this is a spearman, and from left to right it's going to show what this does well against, what it counters, and then what counters it. So yellow is going to be neutral, right? Spearman versus spearman, neutral. Archer versus archer, neutral. Red is going to mean that unit counters the spearman. Orange is more of a soft counter. And then green means that the spearman counters that unit. So you can kind of look across here. Archers or ranged units are going to counter spearmen. Spearmen are going to generally counter cavalry units. So elephants are considered cavalry. The archer, for example, like I said, this counters the spearmen. Neutral. Men-at-arms is really a counter to archers, and then cavalry are a counter to archers. And so, like I said, there's a lot going on here. Let's try to break it down a little bit. Let's see here. So, like I said, it's a rock, paper, scissor system. So all these units that are listed here, we're going to break it down into ranged, really infantry, cavalry. So feudal age is really where you start to get a variance of units that are available and fights that can happen. Let's see here. So like I said, just to try to simplify this a little bit. So we got the spears in that first category. So spear is countered by archers. Actually, let's go the other way. Spear counter cavalry. Is that right? I think that's right. Let's see. Archers counter spears, and then horsemen counter archers. So all these colors, all this noise over here is essentially that, right? Archers counter spear, spear counter cavalry. Horsemen, which are down here, counter the archers or the ranged units, right? So that's in age 2. Now as you move to age 3 or castle age, you get a few more units that aren't available typically in age 2, such as men-at-arms or knights. There are a couple of civs that have access to both of those depending on age 2. So men-at-arms is going to be a counter to archers, spears, and horsemen. Another unit that shows up in Castle Age, and this is only in Castle Age, no Civ has this in H2, is going to be the crossbow. Alright, now crossbow are an anti-armored ranged unit. So your armored units are going to be men-at-arms and knights. Right, so crossbow is a counter to that. So it counters armored units, which is men-at-arms and knights. And as you can see here, it's also kind of a soft counter to any other slower infantry. So soft counter to the spearmen there. And then Also typical in Castle Age would be knights. Now, knights and horsemen are going to be a little separate here, and I'll show you why. So knights, they counter men-at-arms and archers and horsemen. All right, but the horsemen are the same. So they still, the reason they counter archers or ranged units is because they get bonus damage against them. The knights don't get bonus damage. They just do high base damage anyway, and they have a lot of armor, so archers don't hurt them. All right, and then kind of a unique unit that's listed here is elephants. Now they are a cavalry unit, but they also hard counter cavalry, which I think I spelled wrong up here. So they are a hard counter to cavalry. You have slightly different with war elephant and the tower elephants, but in general, that's kind of what we're looking at. So, like I said, this whole big chart here can essentially be summed up with that. However, if you're somebody that likes the Malians or the Abbasid, there are a few specialized units. The Musafati. We've got javelins. Not going to list them all here, but Musafati, javelins, Lansknecht, Mangudai, horse archers, camel archers. They'll have a slight variation on that. And like I said, depending on which civ you're going to pick as your main, you'll get a feel for kind of how to handle those. And that can be its own video in and of itself. Tip number 5, last and certainly not least, is build an army. And I'll explain that. And I also have some footage I can actually show you for this too. But another mistake that a lot of low-level players will make is they will attempt to attack their opponent with either small groups of units, or sometimes not even groups of units. They might just stream single units across the map into their opponent's base to be sacrificed, and a total waste of resources, right? So you want to make sure that you're really putting together a group of units that can go in and either do some damage or kill some villagers, especially if you're into later in the game a Castle Age and they've got TCs or castles or towers up. You want to make sure that you're moving in there with units that can actually finish the job, or at least cause some damage or disrupt or cause idle time. And I'll take a look here at how that can actually be done, or some things that you might want to do before you try to move in and do damage on an opponent. I'm going to make a couple notes on this. A move, if you're not familiar with that, we'll talk about it. And also blacksmith. So the first thing I'm going to explain, once you get in there, you build your army and you go and try to attack your opponent. Let's take a look here. I have this is from Rising Empires. Sorry, this was a tournament. This was actually this weekend. So we're going to take a look at first the A move and what that is. The A move, or attack move, is a command that you can give to your units so that they attack the closest enemy units or buildings that are around them. I'll show you why that's important here. So I can kind of speed this up. Now keep in mind, this is I think these guys are about platinum level. So not to call anybody out, this was just an interesting battle that I caught actually while watching this live. So let's see here. So as you can see, yellow's building up a pretty decent mass here, right? These are men-at-arms, H3 men-at-arms, HRE men-at-arms, which are pretty solid. All right, so where are we at? We're at 15 minutes game time. So now, as you see, as he runs in here, he's way outnumbered. You don't have to take this fight, but also what you'll see. Okay, so he hasn't hardly attacked, and he's lost a bunch of those units. So had you moved in and saw that mass of longbows, you probably should have just pulled back and tried to make some of the units that'll counter that. Now, we haven't even talked about siege. That's probably for a later video, but let's see here. So as they move in to fight again, here's what I'm talking about with an A move. Generally, with an A move, what you do is you'd select, click and drag and select all these units. You'd hit the A key, the letter A on your keyboard, and you just click on an open spot on the map, just on the ground, and then your units will move towards that spot, and while they're moving, they'll attack anything that's in their way. Basically, they'll prioritize units, but if there are no units, they'll attack buildings or whatever else is around. They'll attack the Gaia too. They'll attack wolves and deer or boar if there's nothing else around and you A move a spot on the map. Now if you click and drag, select everybody, you click A for A move, and you click a particular unit, everyone will try and attack that one unit. If they can't get to them, they'll circle around all the other units that are there. So take a look at what happens here. All right, so he's clicking these individual units. So he A moved on, either A moved or he right clicked a unit over here, because look, they're not attacking. They're all trying to get through, and they're not attacking anything, and they're just dying. Nobody's swinging anything. They're just dying, sacrificing themselves. So had he just A moved on the ground behind here, he probably could have got a lot of those longbows. He's probably going to lose all those men-at-arms. He probably shouldn't have taken that fight anyway. But that's what happens if you try to right-click an individual unit, or you A move on a specific unit. You want to pick an open spot on the ground so that they all will attack just whatever's in front of them that they can reach. I don't know that there's anything else here to really look at. So this might be a little better job. It doesn't take the engagement there. I don't think we got anything else. You see here, look, they're actually attacking now. So this was a better job. I think that he did A move here, so they're all attacking. So if he selected that, hit A and just hit a spot on the ground, they'll actually attack. Doesn't have nearly enough to do any damage here, but this game's already over. Going back to the creating bills, you can see here he's only got 59, so he obviously idled his TC. However, yellow is sacrificing a lot of units, and this is King of the Hill, so this game's almost locked up. So let's go back here. All right, now blacksmith, what I want to mention here, as you saw our friend in the yellow there just getting absolutely mowed down, there are two very important technologies to research in the blacksmith, preferably before diving into an enemy's base, especially under like TC or keeps there, or if you're against the English and they have archers. You want to start with, it's called Iron Undermesh. This gives you +1 ranged armor. All right, so again, if you're going to be diving under a town center or diving under a keep or going up against somebody who has a bunch of archers, this is going to give you much more life. So if longbows do 6 damage, for example, and you're adding +1 armor, you're basically reducing their damage by, 16%, right? And that's going to give your units that many more arrows that they can take before they die. So before you move in and really try to dive into somebody's base, that's a very important one that you want to make sure you have researched. The other thing that will benefit you quite a bit, especially if you're moving in and really trying to do some damage or go for the kill beyond just trying to do some villager picks, is siege engineering. This is the technology that allows you to build rams, right? So if you get to the point where you've taken some of those engagements, you feel like you're winning the battle, and now you really want to move in and go for the kill, it's where a lot of players make a mistake, is they'll take that same group of units that they had and they'll just flood them into the opponent's base, and you're fighting now under the town center. You're fighting in his defender's advantage, where he's got units popping out while yours are coming across the map, and you're just never going to win that fight. You really have to overwhelm them to be able to do a lot of damage or to be able to kill them. One thing that'll really shortcut that is building rams. Just drop a ram or two, and then as you move in to do damage, they'll either have to focus on the rams that soak a bunch of damage, or they'll have to send vills out to try to destroy those. While they do that, you can kill their vills. So if you drop a ram or two, you can just right click those onto buildings. You can shift queue them, and you don't have to worry about microing them like you would a mangonel or a trebuchet. You just let those go to work, and then that's going to be very impactful if they can take out anything. Houses, production buildings, farms are great to take out. So now your opponent has to replace those and spend resources on that and not just units. So very beneficial to get both of those technologies there, the +1 ranged armor and the siege engineering. And there you have it, 5 quick tips to help you improve at AoE 4. If you like what you saw, please drop me a rating. If you didn't, thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you on the next one.